Good morning, Vishwa.
Hi, good morning.
How are you?
Good, how are you, Jordan?
Good, thank you. I got my morning coffee here. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
I know it could be afternoon, evening for many people around the world, but I hope you have a drink to enjoy the session with us, a coffee or tea or something. But without further ado, I'll introduce myself first and then I'll pass it over to you. For those of you who haven't joined us before for one of our daily live events within Lakehead International, my name is Jordan. I am the International New and Social Media Officer here on campus. And what that means is I help oversee social media. I help run live events, of course. I manage the Global Ambassador Program, quite a bit more. But I don't want to bore you, so I'll pass it over to Vishwa to introduce herself.
All right, thanks, Jordan. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Vishwa. I'm from Ahmedabad, India, and I'm studying business at the Thunder Bay campus.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you. We're excited to dive into your experience at Lakehead thus far. Is this year number 3 coming up for you now?
Yep, in the fall.
Awesome. Well, so one of the first questions I like doing, just to help our audience get to know you a bit better, is I like to ask sort of what you've been up to during quarantine and social distancing.
So I've started cooking a little bit, mostly Indian food, but I just made a batch of cookies yesterday.
Fair enough.
And I just recently finished watching Game of Thrones. I finished actually this week, the whole show. So
That's a commitment, to say the least. That's a very big show to finish. Did you end up enjoying it?
I did very much.
Awesome.
I was disappointed that I didn't start watching before.
I have to be honest, I haven't seen it myself, but I've heard really good things. I have my own shows that I'm on right now, but maybe after this next one, I'll start that. We'll give it a go maybe for the summer. And tell me a bit about some of the, I think we might have lost you there for a second. She just has a spinning wheel on my screen. So we'll just give her a second to reconnect. Can you hear me now, Vishwa?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
we just had a spinning wheel connectivity there. So I was saying that with your experimenting with new dishes and cooking and trying some new Indian dishes specifically, what's been one of your favorite dishes that you cooked thus far? What's your go-to now?
Even though I've made it just once, it's called bundi ke laddu. So that turned out really, really good. So I enjoyed eating that after.
Fair enough, yeah. And obviously there's a large reward to it too, of course, when you make your own food, and it's a labor of love, it's a process, and then you actually get to enjoy it. Obviously that's probably the best part for sure.
Yeah.
So then diving into kind of the journey to Lakehead itself, obviously, like I mentioned to our audience right when we first started, we're gonna dive into the journey to Canada and selecting Lakehead, and the actual the weeks leading up to you leaving India and then making the travel to Canada, your arrival. Then we're gonna dive into academics. I know I just saw a question not too long ago. What program in business? So you're studying the HBComm program, which is the 4-year undergrad, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And have you picked your major already?
I have. I plan on doing marketing.
Awesome. Just like me, following in my footsteps. I won't take credit for that, though. And then obviously we'll dive into student life. I know you're involved in Enactus. You've lived off campus. You've worked for us here at Lakehead in International Student Services. And then we'll wrap it up with some advice for future students. So to get started, I'll ask my first question again. What helped you decide to study abroad in Canada compared to other countries?
Well, I've actually done a year of university in India, and I wasn't quite satisfied with what I was doing there. So I talked with my parents and we decided to go abroad. And from that, from the whole list of countries, we narrowed it down to Canada simply because of competitive tuition and good quality education.
For sure, yeah, and that's something that we hear quite often is
Hmm.
the competitive tuition, but still the high regard and the fact that your degree is recognized around the world.
Hmm.
In your opinion, why is it important that your degree in Canada is still recognized around the world?
Um, well, it also, well, honestly, it's because it does help you when you're going out to look for a job. Like they see that you're from a recognized university, and each university has its own brand name and reputation that it carries. So
Hmm.
if they see, and the Lakehead Business Program, it has certain accreditations that are recognized worldwide. So if I were to go to an employer after 2 years, they would recognize those accreditations.
For sure, yeah. And the accreditation you're talking about is the AACSB
Yes.
accreditation,
Yeah,
which I think the number is less than 5% of business programs or
it
schools
is.
around the world receive
Hmm.
that accreditation because it speaks to the high quality education that's monitored and
Hmm.
continuously relevant to the current times, and also the faculty that's teaching it to and the standards that they set out through that. And so we're very proud to have that for the Thunder Bay campus. Another thing I wanted to ask is kind of once you've narrowed it down to Canada, so I know you mentioned um, you were interested in pursuing a study abroad opportunity after your first year of university in India.
Hmm.
Um, what helped you actually pick Lakehead once you narrowed it down to Canada?
So with Lakehead, after I had applied to Lakehead, I received a scholarship offer,
Hmm.
and there were some issues with a couple other places that I applied to. So I ended up choosing Lakehead because the process was much more smoother when I was applying to Lakehead, and plus I received a scholarship. So
For
that kind of
sure.
helped me select Lakehead.
And then also, speaking a bit about the scholarship, um, do you have, with the scholarship in mind, do you feel like what sort of budget constraints have you been able to avoid, or has it given you extra freedom at all in your studies?
Um, so international tuition is higher than domestic, but the scholarship does help in minimizing some of the expenses. Of course, you do have to study to maintain it, like maintain a certain grade average,
Hmm.
but it kind of does make it easier because again, you're converting rupees to dollars or any other foreign currency, so it does get a little more expensive, but
For
it
sure.
kind of helps lower the tuition a little bit.
And then I'm sure with the lowered tuition or the less amount of tuition, you aren't having to technically work as much, or
Hmm.
in the case of if your family was helping pay, they aren't sending as much money over too.
Hmm.
And then diving into kind of, you've narrowed it down. I know you talked about now picking Canada, kind of narrowing it down to certain universities, and then ending up selecting Lakehead. A few weeks out, and I know this brings you back a couple of years now, a few weeks out to leaving, as you're saying goodbye to your family and your friends, you're
Hmm.
probably packing your bags slowly. What sort of emotions are you going through? Or what are you excited about? What are you nervous about?
Um, I'll start with what I was nervous about, I guess.
For
Move
sure,
on to
yeah.
the better part. So I was definitely nervous about my visa,
Hmm.
because I had, I would say it was kind of a mistake in hindsight, but I had booked my tickets ahead of time before I received my visa.
Yeah.
So I was very nervous about receiving my visa in time for my ticket dates.
Hmm.
So that was one thing. And now to kind of branch off into the exciting part as well, I was nervous and excited about living alone
Yep.
because it was the first time I'd be away from my family for such a long amount of time. And, it'd be such a big step. So I was excited about that as well, having that kind of independence of living on my own. And traveling alone, I guess that as well. I hadn't traveled anywhere alone yet. I did have my cousin for company for halfway of my
Hmm.
trip to Canada, but the other half I did on my own. So that
Fair enough.
was pretty exciting too.
Yeah, and so going back to one of the first points you mentioned is that you booked your travel to Canada and to Thunder Bay before you had gotten the visa. And looking
Yes.
back, you said that that may have been a mistake. Could you
Yeah.
elaborate as to kind of why you regret doing that and what that looked like, what the timeline was?
Yeah, sure. So, I had booked my tickets well in advance. Like as soon as I got my confirmation to Lakehead, we decided to book my tickets closer, like a couple weeks before orientation would begin here. And then I applied for visa immediately. And at the time that I had applied for visa, it was taking a bit more longer, I think. So we were kind of nervous, like, would we get it in time? Would we not? Because the processing times, they were different for everyone.
Yeah.
Some people were getting it like after 3 weeks they applied, some were getting it a month after they applied. So I ended up getting mine 3 days before my flight, 3 or 4 days before. So that was
Wow.
great.
Yeah, I could imagine that
But
those days leading up were stressful.
yeah, but I would definitely say you should apply for visa as soon as you get a confirmation and just get that process started. It just you just avoid a lot of unnecessary stress at that time.
For sure, yeah. And I know that's been a really popular question recently of
Hmm.
just asking about the visa processes and some of the new things that the Canadian federal government has been putting in place, given the fact that they understand that visa offices are closed,
Hmm.
medical offices to get that exam done are closed, biometric offices or offices that accept biometrics are also closed.
Hmm.
And so it's really great to see that they're making some really positive changes to that process, and they're acknowledging that some of those applications might be incomplete at this time, whereas before, we know that sometimes if students were to submit an application that was half done, it could easily just get rejected, whereas now we know if you start it now, at least the process is already happening. And as you
Hmm.
receive documentation, as you receive some of the outstanding documents that you need, then you can submit that for your application. And then chatting a bit about your actual arrival to Thunder Bay,
Hmm.
how was that experience of arriving in Thunder Bay and getting settled in and whatnot?
Um, so that was pretty cool too. I landed in Thunder Bay at like 2 a.m. and I actually had a friend who was going to come pick me up. So I was hanging out at the airport a little bit. I
Hmm.
have to say the plane to Thunder Bay shocked me because after traveling international for so many hours and like seeing the big planes,
Yeah,
the plane to Thunder Bay was quite small. But there was that, and I didn't get to see much of Thunder Bay because it was nighttime. But I
hmm,
definitely remember the roads shocking me because it was so empty and so quiet, which is very different from how the roads would have looked from where I'm from.
for sure, yeah.
So there was that. And of course I was tired after
Yeah.
traveling so much and waiting. So yeah.
And so when your friend picked you up,
Mhm.
obviously you said it was late at night, so you didn't get to do any exploring. In those first couple of days and even first couple of weeks in Thunder Bay, how did you get out and explore? What were you involved in? Did you do orientation? I have quite a few questions within there,
Mhm.
so I'll let you unpack that
All
individually.
right. So for the first couple of days I was living off campus. So I was at a friend of his place for a few days till I found a place of my own. And I remember I woke up and after I like showered and got ready, I was just kind of walking outside and I was making sure I only walked in one direction so I wouldn't end up getting lost. Like, okay, this is where the house is.
Yeah,
Now I'm gonna walk that way a little bit towards the end of the street, then walk back. So there was that. And then I remember it was raining at that time. There was like a slight drizzle and a rain going on. And then I think it might have been the next day. Me and a couple of friends that I had met online through the Lakehead Facebook group,
hmm,
first year incoming Facebook group, we decided to meet up at Lakehead to get some of like our formal stuff completed, like getting our SI number and things like that,
for sure.
and just kind of checking the campus out. And did you mention orientation too?
Yeah, did you get involved in orientation? And I know that you said you showed up a few weeks in advance, so I know there might be a bit of a gap, but we can jump into
Um,
it.
Yeah, I actually did. I was very involved in orientation. I tried to attend every event there was, and it was quite fun because of the friend group that I had.
Hmm.
So we kind of kept each other company throughout the whole orientation.
For sure, yeah.
Hmm.
And do you have a photo from that orientation experience or that first couple weeks that kind
Yeah,
of
sure.
summarizes?
Yeah, I'll just pull it up real quick.
No worries, yeah. And then while you're showing the photo, if you want to kind of explain and give context to it and whatnot and share who's in the photo with you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So, um, yeah, is it clear?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. So this is a picture of Mount Baldy. There was a ski lift that we all walked up towards. It was
Yep.
like an abandoned ski lift at that time. It looked like that. And it was evening, it was sunset, and so we decided to check it out. And the person next to me, he also attends Lakehead, and he's one of the very first few people I spoke to from Lakehead, and we ended up becoming really, really good friends.
Awesome.
He's one of my roommates as well right now.
Okay.
So yeah.
And so obviously you watched the sunset, it looks like, from Mount Baldy, which that
Yeah.
actually, I'm sure you know by now,
Hmm.
turns into a ski hill in the winter, and you can go skiing, snowboarding, um, tubing. Oh, there's so much fun stuff. And I know that also um, residents and also the International Student Services has taken our students on some of these journeys to go out and
Yeah.
participate. Um, while we're on that topic, have you been involved in any of those events?
Like the winter activities?
Yeah,
Unfortunately, no.
fair enough. Yeah,
I was not able to go skiing or snowboarding yet. I have not been able to. Um, those places you need a car to go there, and I don't have a car right now.
yeah.
So hopefully I get my license this summer with
Hmm.
everything opening up, and we're able to go this winter.
Awesome. And then I know that LUSU and some of those other clubs and organizations or committees will arrange those sorts of events, but obviously
Hmm.
there's just so many spaces that they can
Yeah.
take. I do hope that you get to go out though and experience it. I would certainly
Yeah.
recommend trying skiing.
Hmm.
That's one of my favorite things to do in the winter, at least.
Yeah,
So
I
then,
do hope to try that.
awesome, yeah. Diving a bit into your academics,
Mhm.
chatting about how you picked your program, I like to start kind of where was your dream job almost?
So I realize it may not be as realistic right now, considering that I'm a lot older now. But it was to be a CEO
Hmm.
of a company of I haven't decided of which company, but somewhere where I would enjoy working and looking forward to go to every day.
Of course, yeah.
So yeah.
And so with that dream to be a CEO, does that stem from anything? Is that a relation to like following anyone's footsteps or kind of just passions that you grew up with?
So when I was younger, I saw it was a video of my uncle, and he was in his office, and I was like, that looks pretty cool. I'm like, I want to do that. Let's see what
Yeah,
I have to do to get there, get an office of my own like that. So that kind of got me started into business, and then a lot of my family is involved in business, so I was just surrounded by it. So I decided, okay, let's see, business seems to be the way to success. Let me try that.
for sure. Yeah, I can appreciate that because I did basically the same thing. I mean, both my parents are actually graduates of the Lakehead
Oh,
Business
okay.
Program, as well as my brother. So now all four of us, and my grandpa as well. So
Wow,
we have a
that's pretty
long line of
cool.
history at the business program at Lakehead. And it's been a lot of fun, of course, too. And
Mhm.
I always like to poke fun and say that out of the five of us that graduated, I got the best marks. So it's like my little jab at them, but it's all in fun, of course.
That's pretty cool though. A whole
Yeah,
family from Lakehead.
exactly. Yeah. And then chatting a bit about what you like most about the business program. So you've been in it for 2 years. You've done quite a bit of coursework now. What do you like most?
Um, so to be honest, at first, I was disappointed by the small class sizes because I was hoping to meet more people. But afterwards, I started realizing that maybe that it's not so bad because you're able to like personally talk to the professor about the smallest thing about like the smallest question you could have about an assignment. Like I remember, so there's a course called business writing that you have to take in business, and we get a lot of writing assignments in that. So we would go up to the professor after every class and we'd be like, can you read over this paragraph? Or
Mhm.
do you think we should use this sentence instead of that sentence? Like it would be the smallest things like that. And which is really good because it helps you improve your grade and get a better mark on your assignments.
For sure. And then also just to speak to that a bit more, reflecting on the last couple of years, um, do you think that the small classes have allowed you to connect with students on a deeper level, maybe? And then also speaking to that, um, why would you appreciate connecting with your peers and your classmates?
Um, it kind of does because then you limit the number of people you are talking to and you're around. And plus, there's a lot of group work involved in the business program at Lakehead. So you tend to just kind of gravitate towards the few people that you know, because you know that you can work with them. You know what kind of team players they are. You know their strengths, their weaknesses. So you know that, okay, working with them, this is how we can, divide up our work and get a good grade.
For sure, yeah.
And sorry, what was your second question?
I think I think you answered it, but it was kind of like,
Okay.
why do you think it's important to then know your classmates and be able to make that connection? But
Oh,
I
okay.
think you covered that in the sense that you mentioned that once you get to know your classmates, I mean, at this point, you probably know almost everyone in your program, maybe some to first name basis and a couple small
Yeah.
details, and then others, of course, you're friends with on a regular basis, you hang out with them, all that sort of stuff. But it allows you to then kind of handpick your groups if you have the opportunity to, and then you know you're going to get a really strong mark if you get to
Yeah.
pick your group. But if for example you're assigned a group, which I know is another important aspect within the business program, is that in the business world you won't always get to pick your group, you won't
Yeah.
always get to pick your teammates. So being able to work with everyone, developing those skills throughout the entire 4-year program is so important, and obviously will assist you in the future in growing as in your professional work environment. And then I know you also mentioned to me previously, within the faculty of business, you also enjoy the opportunities that you're provided to attend different conferences and whatnot. So do you want to speak about that and maybe share some photos?
Yeah, sure. So, in my first year, in my second semester of my first year, we were told about this opportunity of a CPA, Chartered Professional Accountant conference that was being held in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And it was held by CPA Ontario. So the government was hosting this, and it was a fully funded trip.
Awesome.
So they were providing bursaries as well if you were selected. And I was fortunate enough to be selected for that trip. And it was really cool because flying from Thunder Bay to Toronto and then staying in an Airbnb or a hotel, it can drive up your expenses. But
Mm-hmm.
fortunately, all of that was funded by the government. So that was pretty
Awesome.
cool. And I do have a picture for that.
And I'm also, I mean, to add to that, it's also great to hear that it's not limited to just Canadian students, even though it's funded
No.
by the government. I know in some situations, government funding can be restricted, and in other cases, the government will step up to the plate and, you know, have
Yeah.
opportunities for everyone, no matter what. If you're
Yeah.
studying in a Canadian university, they'll provide you many opportunities as well.
That's true. And the business department, they also provide certain funding for clubs as well. Like, I know we'll speak about this after, but since the whole funding thing came up, um, this year, when our Enactus team had gone to regionals in Toronto,
Hmm.
we received, I think our entire trip was funded by the Faculty of Business.
Awesome.
So that would include your flight tickets and the cost of living. So, yeah.
That's good to hear.
And this was the picture from the conference.
And so you said that this conference was held in Toronto?
Yes, it's held every year.
Okay.
So, yeah. So,
And so what sort of, what did you learn? What did you take away from that conference?
so the whole conference was revolved around how you can combine the CPA profession with finance.
Hmm.
So they talked about how to become a CPA, what it means to be a CPA, how the role of finance comes into play, and how becoming a chartered financial accountant, CFA. I think it's something like that.
Yeah,
I'm not
I
quite
know
sure.
which acronym you're talking about. It's not coming to me either, but
Yeah,
it's similar to CPA.
it is very similar, and it's like the official for finance. That's like your official title, like the
Yeah.
highest thing you can achieve, I think.
Hmm.
So it was basically how a combination of those two can really help you in your career.
For sure, yeah. And then I know you said we're going to dive into student life in just a minute and chat more about your involvement in clubs. But before that, um, we have a really common question. Students are always curious to know about what sort of research opportunities that they can be involved in. And so chatting about that, what research opportunities have you done so far in your program?
So there's actually a lot put forth by the psychology department. And there's a lot of research opportunities that they post around campus as well, where if for even for for volunteering, you get monetary compensation.
Hmm.
So that's a cool way to get some, pocket money for your next morning coffee.
Yeah.
So I've done a couple of those, and then in the business program, you get a lot of case studies and certain reports that you have to write up. So for that, like it's been a it's been a bit of time, but in business writing, we were given this final term assignment, wherein we had to. The scenario was that we're given $1 million, and how would we use that money to help solve an indigenous crisis?
Hmm.
So that was quite a bit of research because you have to also make sure that you're not plagiarizing
Yeah.
plagiarizing anything. So you have to go through the whole process of, sourcing everything, referencing all your sources, making sure, everything's correct and getting your facts right and things like that.
Yeah, and I know that business writing is a critical class because basically within every course, nearly in second, third, and fourth year, you'll have some form of a major assignment or a report, a business report that you have to complete. And the expectations is that when you make recommendations, you actually get to back them up by uh, primary and secondary resources.
Yeah.
And of course, the point of academic dishonesty and uh, just holding to that academic standard is citing those people for their work and their research that they've already completed. So establishing that foundation right at the beginning is very important. And I just want to address, there's a question from a student. I want to ask, as the courier services are down because of COVID-19, what should we do to send transcripts? So great question. If you are a current applicant and you're looking to send your final official transcripts to Lakehead, whether you are pursuing an undergraduate program or a graduate program, both departments have actually established a new policy where if your institution, so say for example, if you've already studied and completed your high school degree or diploma, and now all the marks are finalized on your transcript, it'll say that you've graduated, you can ask your institution back home to email us directly with a copy of that, and we will accept it as official, provided that it comes from that institution's email account. If it doesn't come from that institution's email account, we can't accept it as final or official. And of course, we do hope that courier services will open back up sooner than later. But if you need to connect with us directly, you can always send us an email at welcome@lakeheadu.ca, and we'd be happy to connect you with the proper department depending on your undergraduate or graduate studies, and they can actually provide you the other opportunities or alternative methods to get that transcript to us. So then back to some of the questions, diving into student life and your experience on campus, off campus, all that sort of stuff. I wanted to chat first about Enactus. Could you give a brief overview for the audience members that aren't sure what Enactus is, of what it does and who they are?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So Enactus is an international group that supports student entrepreneur, and it encourages students to become entrepreneurs. And they do that by, they encourage you to set up programs or projects that support the community around you. They really appreciate that like, you know, you first move into your community and then you expand out to other regions. Enactus is located all over the world, actually. There's a few institutions in India as well that have Enactus. I don't remember the universities, but they're in India as well.
That's okay. I think it shows kind of the reach that this international organization has, and obviously you're a part of the Thunder Bay and the Lakehead chapter of Enactus. Chatting about that a bit more, how did you get involved with that club?
So it was during one of when your faculty orientation is going on, the faculty advisor for Enactus, he mentioned Enactus during his presentation, and I kind of kept that in mind because I was looking for a business club to join, and I was like, okay, cool, I'll go check that out. So in my first year, I went over to their meetings, attended their orientation recruitment sessions, and it was pretty cool because there's a lot of independence in Enactus. There's no one micromanaging you. If you have an idea and you're able to, you know, fully present it to like the executive committee, and we think that, okay, this is viable, we can afford to do this project, there is value in doing this project, we will 100% support you with all the resources that we have. And you don't even have to be part of the business program, which is really cool. We have students from engineering in our club as well. We have master's students as well.
Awesome.
So I ended up becoming head of fundraising in my first year, and I organized a fundraiser as well, which was profitable. So yay!
Good for you. And that was your first year in the club that you became
yeah.
role. Oh wow!
Which is again really cool because we're a small club compared to other universities who have much larger Enactus teams. But with a small club, you get the experience of being part of the executive committee and kind of, you know, being at the top and overseeing all the decisions of the club, whether that's budgeting or how to allocate your resources to certain projects, deciding on other committee members, things like that.
Yeah, and then I know that your more recent role, what do you want to share what that is with the audience, and then kind of chat a bit about what you do?
Sure. So this will be my second year as vice president of Enactus, and so what my role entails is basically I'm like the right-hand man of the president, and since we're a small club, it's each role is not bound by their own duties. Like we all of us help each other out. So like if I'm at an event and say the vice president of marketing is not able to make it, I can just record it and take pictures of the event and then send it over to them. But basically with the vice president general, all the project managers, they would be reporting to me, and then I would later pass that on to the president. And it's basically just helping out the president and then taking on some of the roles of the president.
Awesome. Yeah, and stepping up if they're not able to make it, obviously the go-to is going to be you after that. So that's exciting. And I believe you have a photo from an experience that you got to do within Enactus as well.
Yes, I do. And this is actually one of the most fun events I attended in my first year. And it just made me want to stay in Enactus after that.
Of course, yeah.
So this is a picture of us at regionals. we were this was our team. We were a team of 6 people.
Yeah,
So you can imagine our shock when we beat out teams that had brought 20 people to the conference, 20, 30 people.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so, what was the competition that you had to, or what was the assignment in the sense that you had to complete?
So when you go to compete at regionals and then eventually nationals, you're just presenting the projects that your team completed over the duration of the year. And
Hmm.
you're presenting what that project is, how many people did it impact, and how basically how you just brought that project to be.
For sure. And so, what were the projects? Do you remember them? I know that that was a couple of years ago, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
No, I actually do remember them. So we presented 2 projects in that for that competition, and that one was getting Finlit. I think that was the name,
Hmm.
and it was about financial literacy, which our previous president, he had gone over to a couple high schools in Thunder Bay, and he basically taught them budgeting, how to save money, how to count your expenses, basically the foundations of financial literacy. And then the other one was that was also related to financial literacy. And one
Hmm.
of our past team members, he had gone down to it's this elderly, mostly elderly residents live there. I think it's called
Hmm.
Terrace Bay.
Okay.
And so they had a bank that was shutting down in their locality. So a few of us, we went down, they went down, and they taught the elderly residents how to online bank, like how to set up their bank accounts online, how to
Okay.
complete transactions online, since the actual bank branch was shutting down.
For sure, yeah. And of course, I'm sure that some of those residents of Terrace Bay had only been ever used to physical
Yeah.
bank locations and dealing with
Hmm.
in-person interactions.
Hmm.
And now, given the current situation of the global pandemic, I think that
Hmm.
online banking is definitely being pushed even more so than ever. But
Hmm.
it's great to see that a club within Lakehead University was able to make such a significant impact within a local community in Northwestern
Hmm.
Ontario.
Hmm.
And you guys are recognized that too within your regional competition.
Yeah.
And so you placed, is it second you placed?
Yes, we were placed
Out of a
second.
group of quite a number of universities, correct?
Yes. So, I don't quite remember the specifics right now, but
Mm-hmm.
it was league wise. So we ended up placing second in our, sorry, it was category wise.
Mm-hmm.
So there's because each project is there's categorized into 5 different groups. So we presented in financial literacy. So we placed second for the financial literacy projects.
Oh, okay, that makes
Hmm.
sense.
This year
Um,
we were presenting a project for mental health.
oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure you guys will probably start working on your projects already for next year, or starting to come up with ideas of what they might look
Oh,
like for next year.
yeah, we're always thinking of new project ideas, how to expand on our current projects. And
Of course.
recruitment is always on our mind, so that's something we're always working on.
Yeah, and getting more students
Hmm.
from the business program involved, but also I know you said that it's open to any student at Lakehead. So,
Yeah.
speaking to the viewers that are joining programs this fall that aren't necessarily related to business or aren't in business, faculty of business, um, I mean, the opportunities are still available for
Oh
sure.
yeah, definitely. We welcome anyone who wants to join.
Awesome. And then I know another popular question is kind of students want to know a bit about your experience of living off campus. And so some of the questions that people typically ask is, how far do you live away from campus?
So it so I was fortunate enough to find a house that is located like a minute away from the bus stop.
Hmm.
And that bus takes me straight to Lakehead, drops me right off at the front doors. And that bus ride is about 15 minutes long, so it's not too bad. And if I wanted to walk to Lakehead, I could do that too. That takes me about 25 minutes.
Okay, yeah.
So, worst case scenario, if you miss the bus, you can just walk it out.
Yeah, you might be a couple minutes late to class at that point, but I
Yeah.
also know some students definitely will leave far in advance
Yeah.
to make that bus, and then if they miss that bus, of
Hmm.
course there's other options. I mean,
Hmm.
walking is the most realistic at that point, but then
Yeah.
also you can get a cab, you can get a U ride.
Hmm.
There are options out there, and I know students can also bike to campus. I know that we have
Yes.
fully a brand new bike shelter that they recently built with the
Hmm.
Cases building, and so I know that's been really popular for some students too. And so chatting about your living accommodations. What's the setup like? How many roommates do you have? Do you guys share a kitchen, living room, bathroom, and then separate bedrooms?
So, I live with two other people, one of whom is an LU master's student, and the
Mm-hmm.
other one is my friend, whom I mentioned before in the photo.
Yep.
And we basically have the whole house to ourselves, which is why I said we were fortunate to get this place. We share the kitchen. We have we have two bathrooms. One is upstairs and one is downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
And we have laundry service facilities as well in the basement,
Okay. Yep.
and a living room. We have a backyard as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, not to
You're
show
definitely
off.
gonna get to enjoy that this summer for sure.
Yes, yes, we did make use of that once.
Perfect. Yeah, and I mean we've been really lucky with some very nice weather right now. Today it was a bit rainy this morning. Hopefully it's
Yeah.
going to get a bit nicer tonight. Um, but I mean summers in Canada and summers in Thunder Bay, and the access to obviously Lake Superior. Have you had the opportunity to go swimming in the summer yet?
I have not, but me and a couple others were actually planning to go down and see some a park. Or sorry, I blanked out there.
No worries. Yeah.
Um, but we're planning to go down to see a few places.
Awesome. Well, you know what? After today's live, you have to reach out to me separately, and I'll give you all the hot spots. And I know
For
to our
sure.
viewers too, when you do arrive in Thunder Bay or if you arrive in Aurelia, if you connect with our international student advisors and you connect with your peer mentors, all that sort of stuff, they can make really solid recommendations about where to explore the city, how to get to know the city, but also kind of the fun things to do for free too. That's the most important part, I think, is that within Thunder Bay, the access to nature and doing some of these activities, almost all of them are free. Of course, there are some that are paid activities like skiing and snowboarding, um, but I mean, relatively inexpensive at the same time. So then chatting a bit about one last thing within student life, I know a really popular question or common question we get is, what's it like working part-time while studying? And I know you worked with International Student Services. So do you want to chat a bit about what you did while working on campus,
Yeah,
what the role involved, all that sort of stuff?
sure. So, like Jordan mentioned, I did work in the international office for about a year. Yeah, for a year actually.
Hmm.
And it was a great experience. I was able to be a lot more involved in the various activities that took place on campus, as apart from when I was just a student. I wouldn't have been able to make it because of classes or whatever. But it was a lot of fun, and the staff was super helpful. I got to know a bit more about being an international student, and the various things Lakehead offers that I had not been aware of.
Yeah, like supports and services.
Yeah, things like
It's a
that.
lot because I mean the list is absolutely massive of the different and very unique support services that are available, and that's why we've established the International Student Center and International Student Services so that as an international student you can sit down with one of our advisors, kind of
Hmm.
explain what's going on, ask for advice,
Hmm.
get counseling, all that sort of stuff, but they also then they do know they're fully trained in that entire list and they can properly recommend you to go to the right
Hmm.
place
Yeah,
so
that's
that you
very
do get the
true.
proper service.
Yeah, the
um,
advisors are super helpful. Like, even if they don't know the answer to your question, they will recommend you to go somewhere else, but they will help you find a solution to your problem. I can
for
attest to
sure.
that.
Yeah. um, And then, so another thing I like to do during these lives is kind of ask you, do you remember a life-changing moment, kind of that moment where you realize like you were ready for the next step of your journey and like this is where
Mhm.
you're meant to be? This is where like Lakehead
Mhm.
Thunder Bay is where you're meant to like, be at that
Mhm.
point in time.
Um, I would say when I landed in Thunder Bay, because
Hmm.
like at that point it was like, okay, this is real. Um, this is where my next step of the journey is going to begin. Um, that at that point it was just all, it was very, I guess you could say surreal too,
Yeah.
because I was like at the airport, I was with my bags and everything, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna get a place, I'm gonna settle down, and things like that. So at that point, it was very jittery, I guess.
Yep.
It was jittery as well. That
Hmm.
okay, I'm finally here. Like after months of planning and waiting and just kind of anticipating of what's gonna happen next. What will it be like? I was finally there. Like okay, I made it. I'm here now.
Yeah, I'm sure that those, I mean, you could summarize it as simply as saying like the emotions of arriving are probably so many happening at once. You're
Oh yeah.
excited, you're it kind of the realization like you're here. Everything
Hmm.
that you've been planning and waiting for, as you
Oh
mentioned,
yeah.
is happening. Like
Hmm.
you're truly, you've landed in Canada
Yes.
now. And then you're probably going through of like a bit of nerves, like, okay, no, it's really happening now. I'm
Yeah.
here. So I
Yeah.
can definitely appreciate that. And obviously, you were lucky enough to have someone pick you up at the airport
Hmm.
and kind of welcome you to that arrival and maybe help you through that first couple of weeks.
Hmm.
And that's why I always recommend that if students are planning their travels to Canada to one of our campuses, to use the airport pickup service,
Hmm.
which is free, or at least to kind of connect with us and get involved right when you're on campus. So come and meet us in our office.
Hmm.
Um, I know that that can't happen, obviously, for this semester upcoming necessarily. We're still looking into all those details, but we're very excited to welcome a new class this upcoming
Hmm.
fall. And the last thing that I asked to wrap up the webinar, I want to give you the opportunity to kind of speak to the current students that are watching right now, or the future students, I should say, and give them advice. What would you tell them about how to prepare? What I
Hmm.
mean, it's your realm.
Yeah. All right, thanks. Um, so I would say don't be shy. Like, don't be afraid to reach out to people, to talk to them, make connections. Like, you can start off, and since it's your first year, the first couple of days, first couple of weeks, it's so easy to start off a conversation with anyone, which I now realize in hindsight that it is pretty easy. Like, just
Yeah.
start with what program are you in? Or just if it's someone in your program, what'd you think of the class?
Yeah.
Like, it's all coming back to me now that, hey, I could have done this. But yeah, and kind of just, keep in mind that university is your chance for a clean slate, like a fresh start. If you were a shy person in high school, here's your chance to like break out of that shell. And like if you know that you're not a shy person, you can be a jumpy person or whatever.
Yeah,
This is your chance.
for sure. And I really like what you mentioned about not being shy to just make that first introduction, saying hi to somebody, asking what program they're in, asking what they thought about the class.
Hmm.
One thing that I also can appreciate looking back to my first year is that I was extremely nervous to introduce myself and
Hmm.
make that first step. And now thinking back, I'm also like, every single other person is going through the exact same emotions that you are and having the same fears most likely. And so
Hmm.
it just kind of helps you like they're gonna understand, they're gonna appreciate like if you ask them, hey, what program are you in? Like I'm just trying to get to know people. They
Yeah,
want to do the same thing, and
true.
you're the brave person that did it. You're the one
Hmm.
that took that next step. So it's
True.
so important to make those connections and establish new friendships and build your network.
Hmm.
Um, is there anything else that you would give advice to future students about?
um Also that don't limit yourself with just hanging out with people from a certain group, like say only from people from work or only from people in your program. You never know what connection might lead you where.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of like it's important to branch out as well.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I really want to say thank you for chatting today. We had a really great session. We covered quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Had you on here for 50 minutes now. I'm excited. This will be saved also to our IGTV. So if you're watching this as a recording and you have any questions for us about Lakehead, you can certainly comment on the video. Otherwise, to our viewers, thank you for joining us live. We appreciate your questions and asking us some great fun ones too. And obviously, thank you, Vishwa, for joining me and
Yeah.
chatting about your experience.
Yeah, it
I'll
was
say
fun.
bye for now. And hopefully we'll see everyone at our next live event. Alrighty, thanks
All
again.
right. Bye.
Bye.